Hello. I'm a little arched over here, but that's okay. I'm going to talk about some alchemical laboratory works involving water, and it's pretty entry level stuff, so anyone can really do this. I would like to make people a little bit more comfortable with what's going on in approaching an alchemical laboratory practice, because I would like to encourage more people to do this because I think it's very rewarding work, and I think it's a great thing for personal development, for exploring different aspects of your mind, body, and soul, and not that anyone really needs to improve themselves, but it's just a matter of exploration and achieving deeper states of harmony within the world. So that's how I look at it anyway. So I'm going to explain how I see a work called the Archaeus of water and working with rainwater. So the first step is to gather a few gallons of rainwater. So you could just leave a bucket outside. You don't want the rainwater to be touching a building or to touch the earth in any way. You want it to just fall directly from the sky into the bucket, so you don't want it to come off of a tree or anything. You could make some kind of funnel if you're only dealing with short periods of rain, and it is ideal to collect the rain during this time of the year. So March, April, May, June, Taurus, Gemini season is a preferred time to collect the water. This can also be done with morning dew. You can also put a sheet out on the grass and collect the dew, which will have a different quality to it than the rainwater. It's a little bit different, but right now I'm going to be focusing on the rainwater and my experiences with that, and show you guys a little bit of what I'm doing here. So after you gather a few gallons in a bucket, you want to leave it preferably covered. I've left it uncovered before. It's not too big of a deal, and it's going to putrefy for a little while. There's going to be some creepy crawlies in there. You might see some little worms or amoeboids or whatever, and some dirt in there, depending on if you had it, how meticulous you were about collecting the rainwater, or if you're melting snow or whatever, that's appropriate as well. Once you have the rainwater gathered and letting it sit for about a month, you could do the alchemical month, which is like 40 days and 40 nights, or you can leave it for the amount of time is largely arbitrary, as long as you kind of let it sit there and develop for an amount of time that's not a few days, or just, it's kind of up to you, because there is an art portion to all of this, where there are guidelines and I guess rules kind of, but some of the more fun parts is putting your own spin on it and seeing what happens, because it is an art at the end of the day. So once you've gathered your rainwater and filtered it, you filter it through some coffee filters and gather it in some jugs. So what I use is wine jugs, or because I like to use glass, and they're pretty cheap. So you can get some 3-liter wine jugs, or any other glass jug. You could just use larger glass bottles, whatever you choose. Mason jars might be a good option for some people. Ideally, you want to leave the volume filled like halfway, and then let that sit as well for a little while. It doesn't have to be too long, but it'll begin to develop more, and you'll notice even after you filter it, things will be precipitating at the bottom, or just falling out of solution, or growing down there, or whatever. So then the next step, once you have everything filtered and in bottles, is to separate the volume by distillation into 4 fractions. So what this is representative of here is the 4 elements. So within the rainwater, there is aspects of each of the 4 fundamental elements of nature: fire, air, water, and earth. So within the water, there is all of these aspects of nature, because water is a very important, all the elements are equally important, but it's very important to life, and it can hold things within it, which is unique compared to like air or fire. They do, but not in the same way, right? There's differentiations between all of these things, but water is unique in that you can work with it like this in distillation a little bit easier. So once you put the water in your distillation apparatus, if you have about a liter in there, even if you have a liter flask, you're not going to be filling it up all the way to the liter mark. So you're just going to put an arbitrary volume in there, anywhere from half to 3/4. But I wouldn't fill up your distillation flask all that much. Half is generally a pretty good principle to be safe. And then you're going to distill off the first fraction, the first quarter of the water. So the first quarter of the water that comes over is the fire element, because this is the most volatile fraction of the water that you're dealing with. It's going to this is what comes over first. So if you think about boiling water, right? You have a volume of water in a round bottom flask. It's being heated. The heat creates motion in the molecules of water, right? So they're moving around in a possibly a uniform way, but it's chaotic, and so they're all moving around within the volume of water. And then once it hits the boiling point, the point at which the water will volatilize, certain molecules come over. They go into air state, and then they condense over in the condenser, and then drip over into your collection flask. So what is it about those molecules? What is it about that water that made them come over first? From the alchemical perspective, we would say that it has more of a fire energy associated with it, more of a fire quality, more cardinal, most cardinal, least fixed, still mutable because it's water, right? But it has the most cardinal aspects of it. This is what it may be holding something within it chemically that has that explains why this water came over first upon more detailed analysis. But from now this is just how we understand it, right? So we collect the fire fraction. Next will be the water fraction. So the water. Next will be the air. So first the way that we would name these would be, so we have the fire of water. Second, we have the air of water. Third, we have the water of water. And then fourth, we have the earth of water. So that second fraction, the air of water, is going to have the most mutable, I guess. Well, air and water are both mutable, so that's the way I think about these things. So it's, if I were to separate the 4 elements into cardinal, mutable, and fixed, earth is obviously fixed, fire is obviously cardinal, and air and water are both obviously mutable, but water's a little bit more fixed than air. Air is a little bit more cardinal than water. It's closer to fire. So it's the air fraction that comes over will have a different chemical characteristic about it, a different energetic characteristic about it. Third, we'll have the water of water, and fourth, we'll have the earth of water. At the end of the distillation of the earth of water, you'll notice that what's in your the heating end of your flask has a brownish color to it. It's thicker. It has more salt in it. It has more fattiness about it. If you look at if you pick up your flask and swirl it around a little bit as it's heating, as it's getting down to that lower volume, you'll notice that it almost looks like legs on a glass of liquor or something, like a glass of vodka or a glass of whiskey, where you swirl the whiskey around and you'll notice that there's a rim that stays where it once had been and then drips down along the sides of the glass. The water begins to take on a quality like that at the end. What's left when you're distilling the earth fraction, you don't want to distill it to dryness. There's something at the bottom there referred to as the universal gur, which is, as far as I understand it, a complex of dirt and salt and minerals and solids that may be too small to filter out, that the water may have been holding in different capacities, and then once it gets concentrated, things may or may not precipitate. There may be a color that's taken on, and what I noticed is that the first time I distilled off the 4 fractions, the gur was more brownish, and then I left the gur in there, and what I could have done is poured the gur out and then just added fresh rainwater. But what I've decided to do is to add rainwater on top of the gur to concentrate it, and then and see how it comes out at the end when I just keep adding to it, and keep adding the rainwater to it, distilling it off in the fractions, and letting the gur concentrate at the bottom. So it's taken on more of a honey quality, honey color, like it's less brown, more yellow, and it also, you'll notice the boiling point changes, where it's typical, if you understand, the salt is going to raise the boiling point of your water, so there's more water concentrating in the gur. I mean, there's more salt concentrating in the water that is the gur, that's holding the gur rather, so the boiling of the water will slow down. It'll become less violent. It'll become less pronounced. It's just a bubble here, or at the same temperature rather. So if you have your distillation apparatus set to 99 or 100 degrees, or 101, whatever you were distilling at, 100 is the boiling point of water, obviously. And so if you're distilling at 100 the entire time, you'll notice that as you get down to the earth fraction, it's boiling slower, or maybe not even at all. It could just be completely still, and every once in a while you might see a little blip, a little bubble coming up. But either way, you can trust that there is, that it is boiling by looking at the other side of your still and seeing that our drops concentrating in the condenser and then coming down into the collection end of the flask. So yeah, that's basically the operative aspect. I'll just, before I go into other stuff, I'll show a little bit of this on the camera. So how do I do that? Oh no, I can't flip this. So, okay, so I go like this, and there's the still, right? And there's the water collected. I wish I could flip the picture of the camera, because I'm doing this with my phone. I don't know what I'm doing, right? So, maybe I can. No, I can't. Okay. So sorry if that was weird. I'll try to get some other videos going where I can show a little bit more of the actual labor of what's going on here. There's another side to this that I would like to mention, as far as what do we get out of this in many ways, like what are we trying to achieve, right? So there are different perspectives about a lot of this. Some of them might be a little bit far out. Most of them will probably be very far out for your typical science-y type of folk, or people who have sort of outsource their sense-making capabilities to the scientific community and just, take whatever they'll tell you is true about reality. So you can think about these as used medically in some way. They've been thought of like, alchemy was the first medicine, and so these things have been used for a long time before, more than likely, a lot of the medicine that we think of commonly today. So they may have had results or reasons for thinking these things that we don't quite understand anymore, that we forgot. So any of these fractions could be used medicinally on their own or combined. And the other, before I get into that, I'm going to talk about where you could take this one step further. Whereas once you separate the four elements, you can take the four elements and then separate them off further into their fundamental principles. So each element is going to be composed of the three fundamental principles: sulfur, mercury, and salt. Those are just alchemical terms. We're not talking about sulfur like on the periodic table, or mercury on the periodic table, or the salt that's on your table. Table salt. But it's the salt aspect is going to be there. Like it might not be NaCl salt in your water, or in a lot of the times when we are working with the salt aspect of whatever we're working with alchemically, they are salts. But unless you're literally working with mercury or sulfur, most of the time you're not going to have mercuric or sulfur compounds in your sulfur or mercury aspect of whatever you're doing. Just wanted to make that clear. So those are just words that have been used to describe things differently. So think of it as sulfur, mercury, and salt as soul, spirit, and body philosophically. So these are the elemental philosophical fractions of the water. Then you can take the elemental fractions and separate them further into their fundamental principles, being sulfur, mercury, and salt. Sulfur being cardinal, mercury being mutable, and salt being fixed. So then you can also, at the end, you'll have 12, and then that can also correspond to zodiac signs. So I'll use this as a nice way to segue into what I was going to say about this philosophically, not only as like a physical medical treatment for a health problem you may feel you have. The important thing to remember about alchemy and about a lot of this work, even psychedelics, even if psychedelic plant work or psychedelic medicine in some way, this is a lot more gentle of a method as far as mirroring consciousness, because that's what a lot of psychedelics do. It's like it's a mirror of your own mind, right? So, but it's a bit more intense if you're gonna eat 5 dried grams in silent darkness, or take ayahuasca or whatever. But if you're looking to do a similar kind of work, but not really jump in the deep end right away and kind of get into it in a way that's a little bit more subtle, and that there's really very little risk. It's safe. It's not going to it's not, you're not going to harm your body. You're not going to put yourself in harm's way. You're not doing anything against the law other than maybe gathering some rainwater, which I think is absurd that it's against the law. Or the cops aren't gonna, hey, are you gathering rainwater in there? It's like, it's just as ridiculous like as you growing plants in there. But anyway, it's a mirror. It's a mirror for your consciousness, right? So when this is the woo-woo far out part, where it's like the scientific community doesn't understand anything about this. They're like, what do you mean? It's like, well, you'll see. If you try it, you'll see. And the other thing is, you kind of have to look for it. That's the other part that they don't want. Science wants everything to be very removed from the individual partaking in the experiment, where it's like, in many ways you can't do that. That's where people say that people take the quantum observer effect and and twist it, and like whatever. Deepak Chopra, he gets a bad rap for using the word quantum when he's talking about his endocrinology or whatever the hell he talks about. I don't really know his material all that well, but at the end of the day, anything we measure about the universe, anything, physics, chemistry, biology, is only true relative to the instruments you use to measure it and where you are in space-time, including your body. So everything that you see is a measurement that's relative only to you. It's like it's kind of like the observer effect with the uncertainty principle. When you look at a subatomic particle, it changes its state by the fact that you're observing it, or that you can't know where a particle is and how fast it's going at the same time. Shit gets weird down in the quantum level of physics, where things don't operate in the way we understand them to operate mechanically here. But there is a philosophical underpinning to that makes a lot of sense, where many people might see the same colors, but does everyone see the same colors like all the time? Like if you shifted the color spectrum in one direction or another and everything was like paid respect to, where you're not just like completely randomizing everything, everyone might not see the same colors, and people admit that color blindness exists, right? So it's like everyone does live in a world that's very uniquely their own and sees through their own tunnel of reality that's only relative to their eyes, their senses, and whatever else. Okay, I might be losing some people there, but anyway, what's going on in your flask is going on in your consciousness, basically. It's a reflection of you. So in some way, on a philosophical level, when you are distilling the rainwater, which is part of you in some way, because this skin and this body is the idea that it's separate from everything else, that we are some kind of isolated system, it's just a belief system. Like we're here, all part of the earth together with the air and the rain and everything. It's like you just call yourself a name, but you're really just a thing doing all of this, whatever, right? So when you take the rainwater, which is a fundamental representation of how the world works around us, and like rain, pretty important, right? And we work with it. We're working with an aspect of ourselves. We're made out of water, So when you put that water in the flask and you distill it into these fundamental philosophical elemental portions and study it, you're studying you in a way. So this is some of the beautiful philosophical underpinning of alchemy that I always found missing within the scientific community and within science in general. I mean, I love chemistry, I love physics, and I admire the objective for objectivity, no pun intended. But it's funny in many ways as far as my experience goes, and there is no such thing as objectivity, really. Like, we want objectivity, we really want it. It's like we want things to be like, no, this is the way things are, independent of us. But it's not like that. And we try really hard, and there's other aspects to it where it's like science has gotten really muddled up, where it's like if you take the tenet of science to be objectivity, we want unbiased objectivity, and we're not going to bring our the way we think things are or the way we think things should be into the mix, right? Stuff's gotten really messed up over the years because it's like money got wrapped up into it, and interest or profit motive got wrapped up into it. So it's like we do scientific studies and we say, oh, things are this way, but then we have motives. We're tied to companies, we're tied to financiers that have a vested interest in the results coming out a certain way, or in the results being profitable. For instance, with pharmaceutical medicine, like the reason we have so much pharmaceutical medicine is because you can patent it. Like, these things may or may not actually cure whatever they say that they're curing, but the main reason they exist is because you can't patent nature. It's like that's why there's studies to do with synthetic molecules. money at the end of the day. Um, I'm getting a little off the reins again. So back to the Archaeus. So the other thing you can do with the Archaeus is, or different aspects of it, like this is a 12-fold project where at the end alchemy is often about separation and unity, solve and coagula. So we're dissolving the rainwater. We're separating it, distilling it, not really dissolving it, because dissolving would imply a solid into a liquid medium. But we're separating, distilling off the fractions into these this separate, and then recombining into a unity. So that's spagyric. That's the word that's become very popular to describe glorified tinctures in many ways. But the spagyric means to separate and recombine. So that in many ways that's what we're doing here with the rainwater, where we're separating it off into its 4 or 12 fractions, and then recombining it into recombining it back together. That would be the Archaeus, where we separate it into fundamental principles, purify the fundamental principles, and then bring them together into a unity. Each aspect of these things can be rectified to higher degrees and then used as solvents for extractions in more subtle processes, or more advanced processes, however you want to view them. My phone's going to die soon. I made this little chart about, if you're familiar with the alchemical symbols, you'll see that there's the water at the top being the rainwater, being separated off into fire, air, water, and earth, and then each one of those being separated off into sulfur, mercury, and salt, respectively. Each one of those will then correspond to a zodiac sign. So I'm bad at remembering all the zodiac signs, but say you have each zodiac sign, it has an element associated with it. Each one of those elements has cardinal, mutable, and fixed under it. So I'm Gemini. Gemini is mutable air. So if I wanted to work with the characteristics of Gemini, understand them more, or just align myself with the stars, just get myself in a harmony with the as above, so below, I could take the Mercury of air, of water, Mercury being mutable, Gemini being air, and I'm doing waterworks, take them and drink that. Drink it every day under Gemini if I made enough. And then I may align myself with that star constellation and the archetypes that go with it, in a more harmonious way. And you could do that under every single sign. So that's where I'll leave this. It's getting to about a half an hour, which is a pretty long video for some people. So that's a pretty elementary waterwork in laboratory alchemy, and I'll be making other videos about other things. This is my first video, really, so I hope anyone who watched it enjoyed it. Thank you. Have a good day.